'Tis a tale as old as time. Young man falls in love. He has the whole world ahead of him. Love, marriage, a home, children. But it might not happen because the parents always have to get in the way. That, generally speaking, on a new episode of Historic Murders of Portland. And here's a fun little oddity. Lou's older brother was married to Margaret Bellaire's older daughter, which meant Lou wanted to marry his brother's stepsister at that point. And I did not know that this has happened. Okay. People used to be able to drive through here, but I guess that's all changed. Works for me. This is where I want to be. So, Margaret Bellaire lived at what today would be 1130 Stark, or Harvey Milk Street, as it is. And according to Google, which sometimes can be off by about 20 or 30 feet, the place where she would have lived would have been right where these two buildings meet. And this building, I can't tell if this is an older building that's been repurposed or if there used to be an older building there. I'd have to look that up for certain. I'm guessing this has been made since this story happened. There's a lot, most of the buildings along this stretch are relatively old, and this is usually a lot of kind of ruffians about, but they've painted it up and made it a little bit more welcoming. But this used to be an epicenter in the 80s for, not to get sidetracked, but for like, druggies and prostitutes. And a lot of druggies and prostitutes lived out of these kind of rundown hotels here. But yeah, Margaret Bellaire and presumably her daughter would have lived kind of right where these buildings meet. Now this is, I believe this is called the Mark Spencer, unless it's been changed. It was called the Nortonia, I believe is what it was called. So I don't think she lived here. I think she lived in a building that would have been here, like another apartment complex. My apologies, there's a bit of a breeze. Hopefully it doesn't mess with my audio too much, but again, presuming Margaret Bellaire lived in an apartment or a house that was located generally right here where this building is today. So Lou Torbett had, like so many other stories, he had come and tried to win the mother over, and she just wasn't having it. And I think one of her big issues was he was 18 and her daughter was 15. It may have not even necessarily been so much about that age gap. Part of it could have been just about, the fact that her daughter was 15, and I'm pretty sure he was coming to her and saying, I want to marry your daughter. And she was like, she's 15, I don't think she's quite ready. Like, this story is 1912, so people were getting married younger, but it doesn't mean everybody was into it. So, it gets to be April 26th, 1912, and Lou Torbett shows up here where Margaret Bellaire lived, and as is initially reported, he goes into her apartment and pumps 5 bullets into her body, killing her almost instantly. Now, as he would tell it in the aftermath, he went to the house there, or apartment, Again, I'll put it in, I will have put it in the video by this point. I'm just saying right now I don't know. Margaret Bellaire's home. As Lou would tell it, he came here to try to talk to her, reason with her, try to get her to finally say yes, at which time an argument broke out. And as he tells it, it escalated and escalated, and finally Margaret smacked him right across the face. And then in a rage left the room and came back bearing a butcher knife. And she was coming at him and she was gonna stab him in some kind of rage. And he shot her to stop that from happening. Now, there's two problems with that story, obviously, where Lou Torbet's trying to claim that this was some act of self-defense. One is, now maybe he panicked, but he shot her he emptied his gun into her. Like, I very highly doubt he had to shoot her 5 times before she was like, ugh, and then, you know, falling over. It seems like overkill in that scenario. And on top of that, it was found out earlier that day down by the waterfront, Lou Torbet went and bought his gun. So, you know, a guy buys a weapon and then a short while later, he's right down here at Margaret Bellaire's place and he shoots her 5 times. Coincidence? And he said he bought the gun because Margaret Bellaire had a temper and he was afraid that he would need to protect himself. Somehow, I don't quite believe that. And he was proud of what he'd done, which, if this was an act of self-defense, why would you be proud? Even if maybe you had an issue with Margaret Bellaire, she was standing in the way of you in love, and, you know, whatever. Like, why would you actively say you're proud that you, like, had to kill someone in such a state? Not really. Usually when someone kills someone out of self-defense, it's like, oh my God, I'm just glad I'm alive. I had to do what I had to do. But he was like, I'm glad because she stood in my way. By the way, just past the old fish grotto building here, in that general area, 1 block down, there was a really famous case from 1915 about a guy named John Lind. He was brutally butchered in a hotel over here. So, a lot of murders going on in this area during the 1910s. But somehow I don't think in Lou Torbet's case it was actually an act of self-defense. Very highly doubt it. In the aftermath, obviously this guy's pulled off a shooting, and of course whenever you shoot someone in self-defense, the first thing you do is run away from the scene. No guilt there. He ran out onto the sidewalk here and tried to run away, but he was quickly tackled here by 2 men that reportedly heard screams from the vicinity of Margaret Bellaire's place over here. They think it was probably the landlady screaming, discovering what had happened. So he literally made it from her place to like the sidewalk here, and he was tackled by 2 bystanders and apprehended that way. So, trial came along in September 1912, and there was already obviously a lot of problems with Lou Torbet's angle. Even his claims that Margaret Bellaire tried to lurch forward and stab him were kind of unsubstantiated because there was a butcher knife found in the house, but it was sitting on a table in the kitchen, like really far away from where Margaret Bellaire ultimately fell when Torbet shot him. So did she just yeet the knife when she got shot and it just landed perfectly on a table? Unlikely. But because there's always these old cases, there's always a new twist to the story when you get to trial. So Lou Torbet, obviously, when he went on trial for this is first-degree murder. This seemed pretty premeditated, especially since he couldn't prove that she, you know, there didn't seem to be any evidence that she tried to stab him, but we know for a fact he shot her multiple times. So he maintained self-defense, maintained the same story that she tried to stab him and all that, but he also claimed, now that trial had come, he claimed that he'd been getting blackmailed by Margaret and her daughter Harriet, and that they'd been blackmailing him out of money. And apparently when he went to Margaret's place that day, it was to discuss this matter of money. Apparently they'd already blackmailed him out of like $140, which is a lot of money in 1912. And they were now asking for like 30 or 40 bucks more, which even that's a decent amount of cash. And so he was going to see Margaret and talk to her about that. I'm not giving you any more money, damn it. It had nothing to do with the fact that she wouldn't let him marry her daughter. So this was his new claim, was that this was this was really a matter of discussing money. And as he described it, which this adds a whole new element to the case, and I couldn't really establish whether there was any validity to this story or not, or if this was just more of Lou Torbett's fairy tales. He claimed that apparently this money that he'd been getting extorted from him through blackmail was in relation to covering an illegal procedure that Harriet had undertaken, which, if you put all the pieces together, that screams abortion. So I wonder, in that vein, because maybe the story's true, it doesn't change the fact that Lou Torbett, killed this woman in cold blood, and there's no evidence to show that she tried to attack him. But those elements don't necessarily disprove his blackmail claim. But I'm thinking, if that is true, he ended up impregnating Harriet, and they decided to have an abortion. And since he impregnated her, and abortions were not legal at that time, they were able to use some of that to extort money out of him. And that's at least what he said. Now, don't know if there's any validity to that, but that was his angle, was that, this didn't need to happen. He was the one being wronged, and he only killed Margaret Bellaire after she threatened him directly with a knife. But come the end of September, he is charged and found guilty of murder. He was brought on a first-degree murder charge, as would make sense, and he was ultimately charged and convicted on second-degree murder charges. And apparently the only reason that he was convicted on second degree was because of his age, which he was 18. He was an adult by that time. And nobody really had any sympathy for him because he was so nonchalant when he was on trial. They said that he would sit there chewing bubble gum. He seemed kind of disconnected. He had no real conception of what he had done. At least that was the appearance. Now, it could have been that he just hated Margaret Bellaire so much that he was, as he said, proud of what he'd done, and he didn't really care. But I mean, at the same time, you're on trial for your life, man. You'd think he would have had some emotional investment, and it really didn't seem like he did. So, the fact that he was still kind of young saved him from a first-degree murder charge, which 1912. In these parts, that's a death sentence. So he literally had his life saved simply because there was some sympathy towards him because he was only 18. Which, I mean, nowadays, if you're 18 and do something cold-blooded, like, nobody cares. Like, you're an adult, suck it up. So he managed to escape the hangman's noose, so to speak. So, lucky him. Piece of crap. So I still think he probably spent a good amount. He probably spent, he was young, but he probably spent the rest of his life in prison, because it's kind of like, dude, we let you off with a second-degree murder charge, but what you did was still horrid. So yeah, you consider a life sentence you getting off light. And that's what happened in the end. So I wonder, was he telling the truth about this extortion thing? Was that really why he went there? Could Margaret Bellaire have lunged at him? Maybe not necessarily with a knife, but just gone at him because he said, I'm not going to cover this crap anymore. I'm going to tell the world that your daughter had an abortion. Do you imagine a mom's reaction to that back in 1912? We don't know. It was just part of his defense. He could have been lying through his teeth, but we'll never know. We'll never know for certain whether Margaret Bellaire actually was threatening him, which led him to shoot her. Again, based on the circumstances of the shooting, I feel like he was planning on killing her from the beginning, and a lot of this stuff was just nonsense, just trying to save his own skin. But there is some mystery there. Oh boy, never mind. Train's gone. I was like, no, not another loud train. I've had to stop so many times because of loud-ass trains coming through. But so there's still some lingering mystery to it. But we'll never really know for certain what happened. There's always a slight essence of mystery, which I just guess makes the case more interesting. So, who knows when all is said and done, but either way, probably justice was served in this case. I stuttered a little bit on that because I'm kind of like, well, maybe, probably. So that's where we stand on that case, the 1912 murder of Margaret Bellaire. in the midst of downtown Portland. So I'd like to thank you so much, as always, for stopping by, for supporting me, supporting my channel, supporting this series that I've been doing. I obviously had to take a long break from it, but I've been doing this series for over 2 years now. And I'm not really losing steam. I really enjoy doing this series. I always have. So again, if you're new to my channel or you haven't done it yet, remember to like, share, subscribe to my channel if you haven't done that yet. Hit up my Patreon if you want to support me that way. And you know, I'm always posting new things. I'm trying to post multiple times a week. There are lots of extra content you can only get if you become a Patreon supporter today. Even if it's only $1, you'll have access to that stuff and you'll have my love and admiration. The link to my Patreon is in the description with this video, as well as the links to my Facebook page, Instagram, Reddit subreddit page, and my TikTok. Lots of possibilities. And all that said, from downtown Portland, it's been Steve the Amateur Historian with another episode of Historic Murders of Portland.